Today I have with me Danika Milan. She is a recent graduate from Ottawa University, graduated with her bachelor's degree in psychology and human services. She is currently completing her master's degree with intentions to eventually go to law school. She also happens to be a collegiate soccer player who had to redshirt due to injuries. And so she gets the opportunity to return back to the pitch to play one last soccer season. So what injury had her out for over a year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What injury was that? Can you tell them?
I had a bilateral hip impingement and 2 torn labrums.
Okay, and if you aren't already familiar, bilateral hip impingement, what occurs is there's an abnormality of the hip joint that can cause undue stress on the hip joint, resulting in things such as labral tears or degenerative changes in that hip. So now, hip impingement is a condition that seems to sometimes get overlooked, and I hope that this interview will provide insights to those of you that may be experiencing it. So, can you tell me when you first started to experience your hip pain?
I first started to notice it getting ready for my junior year, so that would be August of 2017.
Okay. Now, when you first noticed it, August of 2017, did you just kind of play with it, or did it just continue to progressively get worse? What?
Kind of all of the above. So I originally just, summer packets, doing all my stuff, didn't really have an issue. Hit August, I started noticing some groin pain, and now I had torn my groin and pulled my other groin in high school.
Okay.
So I didn't think too much of it. I was like, I have some groin problems, not a big deal. Just keep an eye on it. But as the season went on, as we started game after game and double practices, those weeks are always tough. But it started to get a little progressively worse. I started to notice the side of my hips were getting really stiff, really achy. They were popping a lot, popping and cracking. And actually, I found that was my only sense of relief, was to pop them. And I know that's not good, but that was my little bit of relief.
You had that hip pain, but was there a breaking point where you said, this is more than a groin, this is more than just my typical strain of a muscle? What point was that?
I remember actually pretty vividly. We were actually traveling, we were away in Colorado, and about 15 minutes into the game, I was like, okay, back of my legs are going numb. I don't know what's going on, but you're always just taught to play through it.
Yep.
And so I was like, I'm going to play through it. And then I get to the second half and I just have tears rolling down my face and I'm just in complete, just pain, uncomfortable. But again, I'm going to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually went to overtime and it was just a long, hard-fought game. And afterwards, I just collapsed. And after that became the normal after games that I'd be carried off by my teammates. So.
Wow. Yeah. What led you to seeking the doctor, going to get a visit? Did you tell your parents? Did you tell your coaches? Because I imagine at a point you may feel like you're just imagining things. Is that what you felt?
Oh yeah. My whole season, I was just, from the start of it to all the way when it was full-fledged pain and everything, I was just like, it's just your groins, it's just, it's just playing, you're just excessively using it all the time. So yeah, I thought it was just in my head, it's okay, it's normal. Mm-hmm. But then obviously, my coach started to notice, my teammates started to notice, and my parents, my family, they noticed things were off too. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like, I didn't want to go in during season because I'm that stubborn athlete, or at least I was. But I didn't want to go in, so I kept pushing it off, and by the end of the season, I was like, okay, I have to go in.
Now, you did mention you found popping the hip provided relief. Now, what activities bothered that hip the most? Was there any in particular?
Yeah. It was actually pretty hard to even just sleep, like just laying in certain positions. It was really hard to fall asleep. I had to sleep with like a pillow between my legs, and that kind of gave me some relief. But just doing my daily activities, it was strugglesome, climbing up and down the stairs, just trying to get through a practice and stuff. With one of my symptoms that I had, like I said, I just had a lot of numbness, and so once my hips and my legs would go numb, I would play, but afterwards it would all kind of get the feeling back.
Finished, and you decide, hey, I need to get this checked out. Now, how many healthcare providers did you go through to finally get confirmed that you have femoral acetabular impingement?
It took quite a bit. It took about 3 months until I finally had a for sure, this is what's going on. I originally got it checked out, and they told me it was just a detached muscle. And so just kind of rehab it and do stuff. So I did, and it still wasn't working. So there was 1 month down, and I was like, oh, this still isn't feeling right. So I went in, and then I started the process of getting x-rays, and nothing was showing up on x-rays. And so then I went to the next one, and they were like, let's do an MRI. You haven't done an MRI. Some stuff came up on the MRI, but they were still like, not for sure yet. So I finally ended up doing an arthrogram, where they inject the dye into you, and then they do the MRI, and that is when I was officially diagnosed with it. They were able to tell.
Yeah, and if you aren't already familiar, as she mentioned, they did do an MRI, but currently MRA, which is, as she mentioned, the arthrogram, is a gold standard to really help to diagnose intra-articular, so maybe if they have obviously like a labral injury or anything like that in the joint. What were your thoughts when they told you that that's what you had?
It was rough. I kind of was sitting there, and I actually had my parents with me, and I was listening to the doctor, and I was facing him in front of me, and I was taking it all in, and I didn't want to believe it. I didn't believe it. Here I am going to my senior year, and it's the biggest injury I've ever had. Hadn't had surgery, hadn't had, other than like a torn this like ankle or knee, like sprain or something like that, but there was nothing that set me out of the game. I was always playing, I was always able to participate. And so I was just in complete shock, and I had turned around and kind of looked at my parents, and they kind of had the same look on their face, and no one really knew what was the next step. How are we going to get through this?
Not knowing the next steps, obviously the doctor stated probably somewhere along the lines, we're going to have surgery. What were your thoughts at that moment?
I was just, why? How? Is there any way that we, no? It was just so many things were going through my head. It was a whirlwind. It was a lot of information at once, and I just didn't know how to process it.
Now, did you have, obviously your family, but did you have a good support system just to help you take that all in?
I did. I definitely had my family, my siblings, my parents, but I had my team, my family there. And the day I finally told my coach, I had some of my teammates hanging out with me, and just they all got together, surrounded me, put their hands on my back, and we were just kind of like, we're in this together, and we're going to be with you every step of the way. And so I really had a lot of support through my coaches and my team.
That's awesome. So it sounds like when surgery time came, you were somewhat kind of a little bit prepared for it. Now, my question is though, were you educated on what to expect after surgery? How long would you be out perhaps? Did you know those things going into surgery?
See, with mine it was a little tricky because bilaterals are not as common as just a single. So the recovery varies because it could be anywhere between, 6 months to longer. And of course, in my head, 6 months, I'm back out there. Like, that's where I want to be. But in my situation, I had one surgery done. I had to wait 2 months, and then I had my next surgery.
Yeah.
And my full recovery couldn't start until after my second one. So I was automatically, pushed back an extra couple months just because of that.
She obviously had both hips surgically done, but for hip impingement, commonly it can be from 6 months up to a year, even a half, depending on the extent of one's injury. Once you're out of surgery, what kind of instructions were you given at home? Were you given a machine to do things or anything like that?
I was actually given a CPM machine.
So you're provided the CPM machine to help move that hip initially after surgery. Now, when did you start physical therapy?
So I started my physical therapy a couple days after. I had my surgery on a Wednesday, and that following Monday I was in physical therapy. Again, it wasn't like a true, start running laps and doing all that stuff. No, of course not. I was no weight bearing for a minimum of 2 weeks, meaning I couldn't put any weight on it, just kind of like toe touching the ground.
Initially with therapy, what was it like? How did it feel like your first week or so?
It was something, again, like I've gone through physical therapy before, but it was never something obviously to that extent. So not being able to walk or really put weight or do anything, it was just really weird. It was a process I had never gone through, so it was just completely new. And honestly, it's hard for me to remember the beginning of it.
And that's
because it was just, kind of just went right over my head.
Yeah. So I know you said it's hard to remember, but initially in therapy, can you remember what the focus was on initially, just with that rehab and getting that hip going?
It was definitely to get it stable so I can do my other side. In my condition, I had to have it so I could fully put all my weight on it to support my other side. So that was my goal, that was our goal, was to get to that in 2 months. Because when you have a bilateral, they like to wait 6 to 8 weeks minimum. And if you're sturdy enough, then you can follow through with the next one. So that was, but again, it was tricky because I couldn't really put weight, or I couldn't really even have any kind of weight bearing on me at all, so I couldn't do anything like that. So it was tricky, but
yeah. Now, had that surgery, had PT, did a little bit for stabilization of the hip, then fast forward, is it about 3 months then? And then you have that next surgery, go through the same process, and then you're back at therapy again, right?
Yes.
Okay, now at that point, what was physical therapy like now that was like, okay, we have 2 hips that we gotta rehab?
It was both easy and hard. And I say that for lack of words, because it was one leg was supporting the other leg, so this side was strong, it was ready to go. And then there was this fresh new little one that was just like, not just there yet. So
baby chick.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like finding the happy medium of, okay, I know I'm not obviously super strong there. It's just strong enough to put my weight on it, be able to walk. But again, this side couldn't do that. So it was trying to maintain this side and not have it backtrack, and it was trying to make this side catch up without this side getting too far ahead.
Absolutely,
so it was a lot of balancing, but it was exciting, especially once I finally got off those crutches and I took my first steps. I was like, oh.
Like a baby taking their first
Exactly.
step. What kind of exercises were you given at home to do?
A lot of movements and stuff. So for my second one, I had the CPM machine as well, but a lot of movements, light movements, escalated into. This is hard.
Is it?
Yeah.
I know it happened a long time ago, so just trying to
It's-
recall.
Yeah.
Not that she's a grandma, but
I feel like one on the inside.
it's okay if you don't remember either. Well, your recovery has definitely been pretty long, and I imagine you had ups and downs. Now, what was the most discouraging part throughout that recovery? Obviously, as we know, she had to redshirt her senior year, so kind of tell me what all went through your mind, the emotions, everything.
It was very, very tough, very emotional. It's not something, especially going into your senior year, you think about. You're going into senior year and you're like, it's my senior year, it's going to be my prime time, it's the last time I'm going to touch a ball. And then I had this wrench thrown at me, and it became, am I ever going to touch a ball again? And so it was rough. And I think another hard thing for me was I had never had a big injury, you know, and I think in my head I was like, wow, I'm one of the few that never tore their ACL or never, that's a big thing in women's soccer.
Oh, yeah.
I never really had a big surgery, I never had anything like that, and I guess I just kind of jinxed myself. And yeah, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, now you had obviously moments where you just were probably discouraged with your situation, but was there a breaking point that kind of helped you get over that hump to be reminded like, hey, I'm gonna be able to get back?
Yeah, it was when I could finally run again. And I don't mean like wobbly run, I mean I could take off, and that day once I was cleared to run, I probably ran around the soccer field until I just couldn't anymore. It was the best feeling, and I was smiling, and I had my teammates and my coaches there, they were practicing, and of course I couldn't practice, and they all just stopped and they were all just cheering and clapping, and I was in my own little world, and I was loving it. I was like, there is hope. This is possible. Yeah. Let's just keep going along and, you know, just ride the wave. I know there's going to be more ups and downs, but it was, yeah.
Now, when you first were able to run, how many months was that after your second surgery from you actually being able to run? Do you remember?
Let's see, it was probably about like, I'd say 4, maybe 5.
4 or 5, okay.
Yeah.
Now that you're entering really the end of your recovery with physical therapy, just kind of fine-tuning things for you to return back to your last college soccer season. Do you feel like the whole process was better or worse than expected?
Honestly, 1,000 times better. Like, I didn't even know what to expect. But I always thought it was just going to be so negative and just so depressing. And I got so lucky that my PT...
Sorry, guys. Gotta give myself a shout out.
She's the best. And all the techs and just the whole physical therapy family that I've created was just, they were there on my best days, my worst days, and they were part of the reason that I kept going too. It was just because everyone was so encouraging, and it was something that I never expected, to develop such a strong and positive relationship with everyone. And I think that's one thing that I really learned through this process was, you know, this little curse, this little mess that I found myself in. I kind of forgot how much that I'm blessed and how great it is, and I learned a lot about myself too.
Yeah, and that leads me to that point You joined Ottawa during their inaugural soccer season in 2017. As a defender, you started every game. You helped the team reach the NCCAA championships, and then that following season that you had to sit out, they still had a fairly successful season, making it to that championship. What are your thoughts going into your last soccer season?
I'm ready. I feel like, that last year that just passed, yeah, it would have been so good to be a part of, and obviously I don't wish anything bad upon me, but I think I needed that break. I think I needed the chance to see that other side of the field. To see that, redshirting or injuries isn't as bad as everyone makes them. I mean, they're a process, they're a journey.
Mm-hmm.
But going through that has made me such a stronger person, a stronger player. I just benefited from a lot.
Now, you've kind of already touched upon how this whole injury experience has shaped you as a person. It's made you stronger. It's made you better. What are some words of advice that you would tell someone in your shoe? Maybe finding out that they have to have this surgery. What would you tell them?
Is just, be prepared for the worst, but expect the best. It's going to be what you put in, you're going to get out. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Yeah, like any injury, you're going to have your ups and downs, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in those ups that you find yourself running 1,000 laps with the biggest smile on your face. And, a year ago you would have been complaining that I'm running. Why am I running? And it's those little things that you just find and you got to grab onto. And it's the people around you that are going to support you and love you and lean on you, and that it is possible. That's the biggest thing. It is possible. It doesn't matter how minor or how major your injury is, that it can be done.
That's really good. Now, obviously, with the surgery, yes, it can vary from anywhere from 6.5 to over a year, further recovery depending on the extent of injury. But like she said, the good thing is that you can get through it. There are many athletes that have gotten through this injury. So if you find yourself in this position with that condition, definitely know that you are still gonna be able to return back to your sports. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and I do wish you the best on your soccer season, and go Ottawa!
Yes, woo!